Secretary is running late, but will join us.
Yeah. Councillor Singh running late as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Ian Ward offers apology.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Okay, does anyone have any declarations of interest they want to disclose at this moment relating to any items under discussion? No? Okay, good. Chair's remarks, item 3. I've got a few. First of all, always nice to see members of the public here, so thank you very much for coming, Richard and Albert. Always nice to see you. There is going to be a ring and ride operating model task and finish group that will start tomorrow. I'm very keen for this to happen, and I would like to thank all the councillors who have put their names forward for being on this. I see this as part of our role as members and adding value to it. I believe the actual report will go to board in June. To the CA board, and it's obviously very important to a very vulnerable group of members of the West Midlands and our society. So I think that's going to be a very important piece of work that we actually do. You've got to know, I think, for members who haven't volunteered, there have been volunteers to sit on this, so I'm not going to ask for any volunteers at this meeting. In terms of the role of members, and we will come to this later on in the agenda, there's been a meeting of the 3 group leaders with the mayor in terms of how, as an overview and scrutiny committee, an emphasis on the word overview, we can fulfil our role of members and add more value to this committee. And I'll talk about that later. And I also want to mention the spirit of Shakespeare. For those of you who know me, I'm very keen on the difference community rail can make. And on my way in on the train this morning, I see the community rail grant being used for good purpose on the Shakespeare line in terms of art and in terms of poetry, sports. And this was organised by the Shakespeare Line Users Group. So it's really nice to see the installation of the funding of the boards that the Shakespeare Line Community Group was successful in applying for funding for. Any comments on any of those? No? Okay, thank you. Right, item 4, minutes of the last meeting. First of all, in terms of factual accuracy, the minutes of the 10th of March, would anyone like to raise anything? No? In terms of any matters arising from those minutes, would anyone like to raise anything? No? And then in terms of the action notes, on pages 10 through to 12, would anyone like to raise anything in terms of the action notes? The one thing I would say is, where are we in terms of the outstanding information in terms of number 8? Will that be covered by today's strategic dashboard?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone like to make any comments? No? Right, item 5 is the potential, and it should be overview and scrutiny review, because I'm very keen for the O in the committee to be used more and developed. And your report?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for those who don't know, my name is Carl Lees. I'm Head of Transport Strategy and Planning. One of the things that Chair has suggested that we look at over the rest of this year is place-based strategies. So integrated settlement gives us a really good opportunity to think about how we invest funding and undertake activities in places differently in the coming years. So how we combine transport, housing, green infrastructure, regeneration skills in a place to give us the biggest impact that we can have. And in the lead up to the first integrated settlement that we're in now, each area working with the combined authority has developed, at least in draft, the place-based strategy, so all 7 of our constituent authorities area. And importantly, these really are done within the kind of what is important to that local authority, where do they think growth can happen, how could they have the biggest impact on having a positive influence on their residents. And so that covers the 5 pillars in each of these place-based strategies of the integrated settlement, as I touched on: transport, housing, skills, regeneration, and green infrastructure and growth. Absolutely, as mentioned by the chair, this is really using that overview function that the committee has. 6 of these 7 place-based strategies are in draft still at the moment. They're well developed, but they've not necessarily been formally approved by their local authorities. Dudley is the only one that hasn't been through their cabinet. And so it really is an opportunity to try and make sure that these are working well from the point of view of transport. In particular, to really look at cross-boundary issues. So for transport, cross-boundary movements is particularly important. So whether that's East Birmingham, North Solihull, Wednesbury to Briley Hill Metro, Wolverhampton, Walsall, Key Corridor with a rail line there, and really be able to add some the knowledge and skills from the committee into making some recommendations to improve or add different aspects to the 7 place-based strategies. So the work programme would last pretty much the rest of the financial municipal year up to February, and will include some sessions for teaching in terms of what place-based strategies are, what the integrated settlement's all about, and how they relate to our local transport plan. So hopefully this will be a really important and interesting role for the committee over the coming year. And really, I think I'll leave it there, Chair. And if there's anything you want to pick up, given I think this was one of a strong recommendation from yourself, we should look at this.
Yes.
And then happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Carl. I think the key element is the role of transport in building place. And in terms of the mayoral announcements and other key regeneration activities. So the mayor has been very clear he wants to develop the sports quarter based on the new City of Birmingham Football Club stadium as the anchor site for that sports, and the metro actually, the East Birmingham North Solihull Metro actually serving it, picking up the redevelopment in Washington Teeth for the High Speed 2 depot, picking up going into North Solihull the new development of Arden Cross in terms of the health innovation campus, in terms of new housing, in terms of the High Speed 2 interchange in North Solihull by the NEC and the airport, in terms of the growth of the NEC group and the airport, want to actually bring to that area, which will create hopefully a lot more jobs. But we will need to get people from our region to where those jobs are being created, and all the skills that are involved in this whole place-based strategy. So I think that's very exciting, that transport corridor. We're doing a lot of work on sprint along that corridor, cross-city bus, and also potentially the metro, if the mayor can persuade the government to actually fund it through whatever resources. And as I say, this is, I think, a key transport corridor for us as members to use our overview function. But as Carl has said, the only local authority that has a place-based strategy in place at the moment is Dudley, and we've got another important transport corridor in Dudley between Wednesbury and Briley Hill. And how can we make the most of the role of transport and build it that place? So this is why I'm very keen, and I alluded to earlier a meeting between the 3 political leaders on this committee with the mayor, and I think it was quite clear, and I'm willing to be contradicted, but I don't think I'm going to be, but the mayor was very keen that we as members look at place-based strategies and how we can add value to the process. Any comments from any colleagues? I'll take Councillor Alden first.
Thank you, and yes, happy to support this going forward. I think it's a sensible thing to do. Just wanted to pick up
one of the examples you gave as a really proof as to why we need to make sure we're getting this right, and hence why the scrutiny review is so important. If you look at the proposed sports quarter in Birmingham, out by the Birmingham Wheel site, that has real opportunity for the city and the region. But one of the key things that will need to happen is actually making sure there is a new train station in the right place to be able to enable in and out access quickly. If you don't have that place-based strategy taking place, and you're not actually going to properly account how are you going to get the transport right. What we don't want to do is end up seeing one or two new sports stadiums being built in a part of the city where there's then no actual transport getting those people in, when you're going to have tens of thousands of people needing to get in and out. We've seen the issues with people from the Midlands trying to get down to Wembley in the last few months, both Blues and Villa fans, and the trouble that's been. What we don't want to have is a sports stadium in our own region where people can't get to. Thank you.
Okay, and before I call Councillor Kane, I'm going to say we should also use the knowledge of ward-based members in the particular transport corridor. So, for example, East Birmingham Councillor Zachary Chowdhury represents an East Birmingham ward, Councillor Ian Ward represents an East Birmingham ward, and Councillor Kane represents an North Birmingham Hall ward. So, on that note, Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Chair. While this process is going on, I would hope that we should beware of 20th century attitudes such as all roads lead to the city centre. That the city centre and indeed the regional centres or the local centres are very much in decline with working from home and with shopping online, and that it is, as Councillor Alden remarked, the centres where there will be future travel required, such as the sports stadiums, where our transport for the future should be concentrating. Thank you.
Yes, and I don't want members who don't represent East Birmingham, North Solihull or along the Wednesbury to Barley Hill corridor to think we've forgotten them. I see this very much as the initial steps, because these are pertinent at the moment, but should other place-based strategies come into place and there is a particular need for the role of transport within them, then I would say that future overview and scrutiny reviews look at those place-based strategies in the relevant local authority. Councillor Locke.
Just wanted to add, as you and I both know, how long it has taken for the Camp Hill line. It is progressing. Slow and steady wins the race, as I say, but it's progressing. But it has taken over 80 years, and we're nearly at the finish line. So it would be good to see the Camp Hill line.
Yes, and I think that,
and maybe go further. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, not at all, Councillor Locke. I think what the Camp Hill line will give us evidence is that how the operation of the new line affects the local centres it actually serves, picking up on Councillor Kay's point about the need to revitalise our local centres.
Yeah.
And looking at evidence elsewhere, because if I recall correctly, the new Northumberland line that's reopened has vastly exceeded the number of passenger journeys that were predicted, vastly exceeded, and how that can have an impact on the local centres across the whole of our region, because I'm very keen to get away from focusing on the city centres and the town centres we have and look at communities outside those city and town centres. Okay, any other comments? If there's none, can we agree the recommendations on page 13? Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Clement. Right, so I'm going to move on now to item agenda 6, which is bus franchising, consultation outcome and mail decision. We have a brief presentation beforehand. Of course, the reason for having this meeting today is that we could have these discussions in advance of the board meeting. I thought that was particularly important, rather than have this meeting after the board meeting. Obviously, any comments or views made by members of this ONS committee will be fed back into the board meeting, and I will also be speaking at it at the board meeting and reflect any comments or points that members would like me to raise. So I believe that Rachel will be doing the presentation first of all. So over to you, Rachel.
Yeah, can I just first of all mention thank you for the overview. Just to give members expectations as you shared. This is a brief overview of the consultation itself, not of the full franchising assessment, and of course then through the dialogue with any questions and comments associated with the wider papers that have been shared. We've also got Matt Lewis and Steve Hayes here for that part of the conversation too. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you. I'll just get the slides up. These were shared ahead, trying to hopefully do as well. I'll just so as Pete mentioned, this is just a brief overview of the consultation and the responses, and then we can go through some of the high level detail and then open for any questions. So as you'll be aware, we ran a 12-week consultation from the 6th of January to the 30th of March. In total, we received just over 5,000 responses, but when we removed duplicates and those who'd only answered one question, we were then left with 3,616 responses to analyse. I think we spoke about this previously, but the purpose of this consultation was to look at the principles behind franchising and the way the suggested mechanism to manage franchising. It wasn't to look at what the network would look like, how it would be managed if we were to move to a franchised system. And there's just some high level stats on some of the responses and the demographics across the responses. There are more details and broken down into further across ethnicities, disabilities, jobs, employment, etc. within the detail of the response report. Just to give a snapshot of what the public responses looked like. So in total, we had 52% who either supported or somewhat or strongly supported the assessment. There were 30% neutral and 18% that were either somewhat or strongly opposed. What we did see through a lot of the responses was that people really wanted to get into the next layer of detail around what bus services looked like, what it meant for fares, timetables. So I think if the decision was made to move to franchising, then the next stage where we look to engage on what that actually means and how that is rolled out, there'll be a lot of interest from communities and from residents across the West Midlands on what that looks like. So I think Steve's just going to cover the local authority responses.
Yeah, thank you. So we had significant engagement with all local authorities across the region, including many faces around the table here today. That was with councillors. So we had a number of all council briefings. We attended in person all the council scrutiny committees, and also a number of full council meetings as well as one-to-one briefings with all leaders. And we had significant officer engagement as well through our newly established trust reform panel, which representatives of all your authorities sit on too. Both there's transport reps on there and also finance reps too. In terms of the outcomes of the consultation, there was consistent support actually across all authorities around the strategic case. So every authority understood why franchising was a good option, but also consistent recognition of the risks associated with franchising as well. And depending on whether an authority supported or opposed the scheme, very much depended on how they considered the balance of risk versus opportunity. So you see from the figures there, 5 of the authorities, Birmingham, Coventry, Solihull, Walsall, Wolverhampton and Sandwell supported franchising, neutral Walsall and Sandwell. Opposed?
Dudley, I think.
Sorry, Dudley opposed, apologies. I should have just said the slide in the pack I won't speak to. In terms of the challenges that were raised through that, so financial risk was an issue raised by the authority. We've had detailed discussions both leading up to the assessment and throughout the consultation with the finance officers, officers of all the authorities around some of the financial risks and how we propose to manage those. Also, concern around whether the combined authority has the capacity and capability to implement and manage franchising effectively. That's set out in the management case. And also a recognition that the authorities wanted to ensure they have some representation and input into future decision making around franchising as well. And again, governance mechanisms being established to make sure that authorities can input into franchising once it is implemented. And Matt's going to talk through now the operator responses.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, similarly, extensive consultation with bus operators, so through forums that bus operators, Bus Alliance, and one-to-one sessions too, including actually a number of bus operators that don't operate in our area, most of which reached out to us because they've got an interest in operating if we do move to franchising. Vast majority of bus operators supportive of the change. We had a couple that were not in that space. Travel Express were opposed. They're a small operator, for those that don't know, in the region, and largely their view was they were concerned that there might be more risk for small operators in a franchising model than there is today, and we've got to make sure that there is room for small operators. So that was their main concern. Ritala put somewhat opposed, but when you went into the detail, they're actually in favour of franchising generally, but they like it done in a very specific way, which we've gone on to look at in depth. What came out in terms of themes, so operators are saying to us, and quite rightfully, that we need to get the lotting right so that it's an attractive for operators to bid for and efficient. Need to set up the contracts in such a way where, again, they're attractive when we attract competition. We have to have a fair method for transferring assets. They own assets now, and we want to bring them in-house. They brought out some other general points. So again, regulation helps us move the dial, but there are wider issues, particularly things like congestion that causes problems and it's getting worse, etc. So franchising won't necessarily resolve congestion issues, but perhaps gives us an opportunity to pull some levers. Similarly to what local authority said, bus operators were keen to make sure we had the skills to take this on. Again, we set that in the full franchising assessment. And they, as you'd expect, want to be involved if we get into the real detail around the specifics of what franchising means. So yeah, in a nutshell, most operators were supportive, but there was a number of helpful observations that came
in. That's it for slide-wise, so open to questions.
Any questions? Councillor Payne. Sorry, no. Councillor Nicholas first.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Can I be associated with your earlier remarks about the members of the public in attendance? I think former Councillor Worrow should be mentioned. It's a delight to see him here today, despite his past illness. So it's great to see Richard back in the frame as a member of the public. Chair, there's a number of questions that arise from what we have in front of us, not least of which a job well done with the operators, because quite clearly they have moved considerably from where they were to where they are now in terms of support for franchising. And there's a question, and there needs to be this understanding of where the combined authority, the mayor, who will make the final decision, finds the funding in order to ensure that that gap that is currently there is matched, because the last thing the mayor would want is to start off a new service with a reduction in service. So that needs to be understood, and how that will be taken forward. And I think it's also fair to say that if we had the opportunity, we wouldn't start from here, i.e. franchising, which was a construct of the previous government. We would want municipalisation. I'm glad I got that word out in one go. Because franchising is good as far as it can go, but it's not where we want to be ultimately. And so there needs to be an assurance that should we, and it looks likely that we will go down the path of franchising, that does not preclude us, should we agree to do so, to the opportunity of municipalisation through the government, the bill currently going through government, which will give us an opportunity. So again, assurances need to be given on that this does not preclude. A short question on the number of authorities that strongly agree, or mildly supportive, somewhat supportive, and so on. Can you remind about it's the mayor's decision, but the guidance, the mayor will listen to the guidance offered by the authorities. And should there be a majority one way or the other, that would be taken into account. So I'm pleased to see, for example, Solihull is somewhat supportive, where it was in the past, my recollection is that they were not supportive. So clearly work has been done with that authority, but other authorities, i.e. Dudley, are opposed. So again, there needs to be an understanding of the decision process. And I think probably the most important aspect that I'd like to raise today is in relation to governance itself, because there will be a need for franchising model going forward to be well governed politically. And we need to have an understanding of who will do that, how it will be done, because it would seem to be, no puns or every pun intended, TDOS committee would be the ideal vehicle to be used by the mayor for governance of franchising itself. There's a number of issues there, Chair, that we could need to have some answers on.
Who would like to give those answers to Councillor Nicholas?
I'll pick up the first one and then I'll leave the rest to Pete and the team. So in terms of funding, so sustainable funding, which I think is your question, Councillor Nicholas. Of course, we've secured the bus network with the work that the team have done with all operators through to December this year. We're unable, the MTFP is showing that we have got financial deficits moving forward, which we're trying to resolve, but we don't have the full plan until we see what's in the CSR on the 11th of June. And then we will be able to build from that what funding is required in terms of that as well. Of course, as you'd expect, there's lots of lobbying going on from everybody within this organisation and also local authorities in terms of what should be included in the CSR. I don't think we'll be able to fully answer that question until we've got that that outcome. So it's probably a conversation that we can have after the spending review has been. Yes, that's what it is. That's the answers to Pete and thing.
Can I pick that up immediately then?
Yeah, sure.
You're absolutely right in terms of lobbying and so on, and the political desire to go forward. Nevertheless, with the constraints that the government are facing, there may be problems associated with the decisions, the future decisions, which may have an impact. Worst case scenario, that funding isn't available, would that require a decision of the mayor, of the combined authority, of ourselves, as to what the implications would be?
Potentially, yes, because you will only be able to buy the network that you have the available funding for.
Yeah.
And depending on what the funding outcome is, we would need to look at some of our local policies in terms of what we currently fund as discretionary policies as well. So it is something that we need to keep an eye on. Our intention is to make sure that we maximise the funds in order to make sure that we have us that meets the needs of this region.
Before I bring you in again, Councillor Nicholas, what I'm very keen to do is that as soon as the CSR is actually announced on the 11th of June, which is 2 days after our next meeting, that officers send a very detailed briefing note on the impact of the CSR on all matters pertaining to TDOSC and Transport for West Midlands on the transport element of the Command Authority.
Yeah. You've answered my question. I was going to raise 2 days after the announcement is 2 days after our next committee, but it would seem that we would need perhaps a discussion as TDOS committee as soon as possible afterwards. So could we take that into account as to how best to do that? Having a verb communications rather than face to face, I think it's important that we have that discussion and debate.
If I understand the Constitution correctly, and Dan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the board at their meeting on the 13th of June begins the start of the municipal year. So any changes to membership decided by the constituent authorities for this committee will then come into effect after the AGM and the board meeting on the 13th of June, and that at our first meeting of the new municipal year, and that's the first meeting after the board meeting, I would imagine that would be a key element for the agenda for the new TDOS for 25-26. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's excellent.
Can I, sorry, Councillor Huxtable, can I just give one note of caution? Whilst the announcements will be made on the 11th of June for the CSR, it is what DFT have been given for transport funding. DFT will then need to go away and probably take about a month for us to know what each authority allocation is. Each combined authority allocation is for transport as well. So we might not have the full detail until July, but we can bring you what we know so far, but it would need to be followed up once we've got the final allocations as part of the DFT work that they have to do once they know what their budget is from the CSR.
Yes, I would hope that it would be DFT would do that in time for our July meeting, wherever that July meeting fits within our scheduled meetings.
As long as you're aware.
Yes, thank you. Pete, Councillor Nicholas's other questions.
I'll pick up on a couple of the other points there that were raised as well. Firstly, in terms of municipalisation, the point is noted, and of course there have been different views on municipalisation across different local authorities as we've gone around. The key point that's highlighted within the board paper reports and has been through the process responded is that it has been, as the full franchising assessment has been undertaken, municipalisation isn't and wasn't an available option within this. But as we have set out to local authorities, and this isn't preempting any future decisions, that there is currently a buses bill proceeding through Parliament, through parliamentary process, that is looking to enact the potential possibilities of local municipalisation opportunities for the future. And that's not stating within this case which direction that either the existing mayor or any future mayor would take that, but to state that it will become available in terms of those powers as future bills passed through Parliament. So that's one of the key things that we're keeping a close eye on through
Before you move
legislation.
on then, Pete, if I may, Chair,
Yep.
are you saying we could then, part of the current opportunity, i.e. franchising, it will not preclude us in municipalisation considerations when they become available? Acknowledging the point, that's not on the table at the moment.
Exactly. It doesn't preclude, it doesn't force you down that option, but it absolutely doesn't preclude the potential for municipalisation in the future.
Is it on this point, Councillor?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Isn't it right that this current transport bus service act 2070 prevents us considering municipalization, apart from we can buy the company and then bid as other operators do? So that's the problem, please, and that needs to be pointed out.
Yes, correct. Existing legislation precludes it in terms of, not just in terms of the direct legislation, but there are all sorts of legal implications that go beyond that. But the bus services bill that is currently proceeding has within it a proposal that would remove that prevention of local transport.
While that's a very important point, I would like to keep this focus to bus franchising and the decision being taken by board on Friday. But I recognise, Councillor Akhtar, it's an important point for future discussion. And the other questions to Councillor Nicholas, answers?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key points. One, in terms of the listening to views of local transport authorities, the Mayor has obviously continually been briefed on the responses from the consultation from local authorities as well. And not only that, there has been continued dialogue between ourselves and each local authority on their responses where that's appropriate to do, so including the presentation and further briefing that we had with the Coventry members last week. So they are ongoing and have been. So there has been consideration given to the responses of the local authorities and continued dialogue in that space.
Chair, can I clarify my question?
Yes, of course you can.
On Friday, the combined authority will receive the presentation. Will they be agreeing, I haven't read the papers yet, will they be recommended a way forward in terms of authorities? And if so, is there a requirement to have so many authorities in support for that to go forward? Or is it just a simple majority or what?
It is, well, the decision to move to franchising is a mayoral decision. However, within the board papers that are shared, there is a recommendation from officers from the combined authority to the mayor into the outcome of this consultation, which includes all of the references and views of the local authorities as well. There is within the board an opportunity for any further comments to be provided to the mayor from local authorities, from leaders with the board, but the board is not a decision maker in this on Friday. It is a mayoral decision that will be made following any further views that are undertaken from the board itself. So that, and the final point that was made around governance and future governance, actually within the papers that have been shared, there is a draft proposal around governance arrangements, but it's absolutely been acknowledged that as we move from a decision, and if a decision is taken to move towards franchising, then as we move to transition arrangements, that then ensuring that governance arrangements are one of the primary work streams to work through with local authorities involved in that work stream as well. And there have been some draft papers set out on that with questions and answers from local authorities as part of the paper pack. I think that was all of them, Chair. Thank you.
Do you have a...
Yeah, just briefly on the governance aspect. So it's work in progress, a lot of decisions, the discussion to be taken at mayoral level as and combined authority level as to the way forward. But those discussions have yet to happen. Yeah?
Indeed, at a political level, it is worth noting, though, through this process that a lot of extensive work undertaken through local authority officers and combined authority officers together to start to work that through in draft format has been underway over the past couple of months. But what we haven't been in a position to do is mobilise into transition arrangements. That's not, we can't predetermine any outcome of this. So it's just about preparation work in that space.
I guess my question is in relation to political discussions, and you're indicating those have to take place for absolute clarity.
Yes, there will be further dialogue around governance as a key part of this, following any decision on price.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to now call Councillor Kay, then Councillor Hyatt, then Councillor Alden, and then Councillor Akhtar. Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Chair. And may I first observe that Birmingham bin services are an example of municipalisation and why it doesn't work. If we've learned one thing from the local elections, that is that the political complexion of this authority may change radically as early as next year. I believe that a new management would require to understand why we're spending 100 million on bus depots and transition costs without adding a single extra bus mile. Getting to the report, the original proposal was for area-based lots, and I notice in 2.6 that we're now considering having some route-based lots to meet the requirements of smaller operators. Essentially, with area-based lots, that is basically precluding these smaller operators, so that you're risking ending up with a monopoly situation as we've got at the moment. I therefore welcome the proposal to add route-based lots to the system. However, I believe that the hybrid system will also add rigidity in the system where a growing smaller operator, and we certainly hope that they will grow, will hit a ceiling with the area-based lotting. And I would therefore ask officers' opinion and urge them to consider a fully route-based lotting system as perhaps being the simpler option. Thank you.
I'm going to call Matt in on this question, if I may, first of all.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. So, yeah, we've done quite a bit of work to review Ritala's position, ultimately they put forward in terms of route-based as opposed to area-based franchising, and that there are some benefits of route-based. One of the biggest drivers of the benefits in the full franchising assessment, though, is competition. So at the moment, there's no real competition in our market. So through franchising, we want to deliver competition for the market. And we know from the discussions that we've had with all the operators that access to depots is a real barrier. So if you're an operator that's not in the West Midlands at the moment and you want to bid on a franchise contract, in order for you to do that, you have to procure a depot. I could buy a depot from one operator that exists now, or find some land and build a depot, which will ultimately mean it's very difficult for you to bid in the franchise contract. So in procuring the depot and doing a depot-based franchise, you'll create more competition. Well, the competition will mean that profit margins are lower, and lower profit margins means we get more bus network. So there are some benefits of the route-based approach, and this is why we're looking at having some routes, particularly for smaller operators. The other thing that I would say is that we don't just see providing a few route-based contracts as the way that will support smaller operators. We're looking at a whole host of other things that will support smaller operators. And I take your point around, if all we provided was a small number of routes, how would they be able to grow? We've got to consider that as we work through. So we have done a full review of the route-based approach, and there are benefits, but the disbenefits, particularly around competition. There's also other challenges around the administration. So, you know, to put out what would be hundreds of contracts rather than 8 or 9, which is more of an administrative burden. The example that Satala quotes in London, so London has route-based, but London have about 100 depots. In our area, I think there are 11 depots in total. So if we were to be in a position where we were going to go down that route, we have to radically increase the amount of depots so that there could be real competition for it. So hopefully
Yeah, no, just add a point or two with relation to that. One of the key issues that we find is as we move towards particularly zero emission network, and actually locking in infrastructure funding, locking those into commercial premises is actually tying down the future lack of competition and engagement in the region to try and push those out. I think the other point here as well is about not perceiving necessarily that franchising in of itself is a risk to smaller operations. What we have found is that there have been other issues that have affected the lots of smaller operators, particularly in this region over recent years since COVID, and actually working together with government on making sure that we have the right environment for some smaller lots within the wider franchise is going to be absolutely key. I think just the other point around paragraph 2.6 and the area of us having this, it was always a proposal that we have some level of route-based franchising in there to ensure that we accommodate smaller lots. So it's not a new proposal, it is an existing proposal, but we do know that that is another key area of work once a decision is taken. Thank you.
Thank you. And I had been in favour of the idea that we would be buying bus depots because of the reasons that you've given. And I was trying to see how that might work in a route-based franchise where it might even be possible for one or more operators to share the same area. So I put the question to Rotala, and they were really quite assertive against the idea, saying that they would prefer to decide on the location of their own depots and to be able to run their own little work. So I think we actually have to be a bit cautious about running into buying depots, particularly as Councillor Alden will remind us of the costs that might arise. And so I think we actually need to have, first of all, if we're going down the franchising route, I'm strongly in favour of the flexibility and the competition that will be provided by a route-based service. But in that context, I think also we need to actually see what we're proposing on depots to see whether it is actually a practical solution to what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
I take that as a comment rather than a question. So I'm going to now move on to Councillor Hyatt. Is online.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm very pleased to note that we very rarely make decisions based on one small example only. And I love that our survey has been so complex, so inclusive, and I love the detail with which the answers have been reported back. So thank you very much for that. You might be pleased to know that my esteemed colleague has asked all the questions that Labour Group put forward. So Pete Bond has already answered my question. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hyde. So that does help in terms of timing, so I can move swiftly on to Councillor Alden.
Thank you very much. And there's a few points I wanted to pick up. Firstly, just to highlight, because I don't think it's been mentioned, and I think you've always got a record, that there's only 3,500 people have taken part in this consultation out of 2.4 million people in the region. So we are talking about a very small sample size of views across the region. The second point I wanted to pick up is just following on what a couple of members have talked about, which is the financial risks that this might pose. I noticed in the introduction, I think it was Dudley Council who mentioned and raised the concerns about the financial risks to their council from doing this. So can we just get a bit more detail about that? What are the risks, both to the combined authority and then to the member councils themselves? Just in terms of bus depot costs, so I can understand the logic that's given us. It helps improve access, helps new entrants to the market. But I would just want, as Councillor Cade picked up, the experience in Birmingham was that the money set aside and the budget decided on what the cost would be was just grossly underestimated. And in Birmingham, they set aside 2 million to buy a bus depot. All of their experts, if you like, said it will cost 2 million, it costs 16 million. So it went up 8 times. So I think let's just bear that in mind, that whatever you're looking at in terms of the cost could well be well out, and therefore that could actually change all of the numbers in terms of whether it stacks up proceeding with it. I wanted to agree with a point Councillor John McNichols raised, which was around the risk to total bus journeys. I just want some more information about this, because we raised this last meeting and I still don't really feel confident that we've got to the bottom of this issue. So as things stand, with the current funding that's available, I don't think we can be making any assumptions there will be extra funding after a spending review. After franchising, will there be more or less journeys happening in the West Midlands by bus? And then the final point I wanted to pick up is then to slightly disagree with something Councillor Shumpert said. And that is just around this point of municipalisation and versus franchising. I'm actually someone who's open to hear the case on both. I'm not set in mind in either. But I do think that if we are going to proceed with spending millions of pounds pursuing one, then actually there does have to be a sort of minimum time given that we will stick with that one process. I don't really see it's right to use taxpayers' money to proceed with franchising for 2 years, spending 100 million, say, and then change that model 2 years later. So if the idea is, and I don't know what the direction from the mayor is, but if the mayor wants to proceed with municipalisation, then we ought to wait to that point and then make that decision on which is best, not spend a load of money on one system to change it in a year or two's time. I just think we need to be firm that, whatever the right system is, we should only change once, not change twice, because we're just going to spend an awful lot of money drawing up plans that will actually then have been wasted.
And before I call officers in to answer that point, if I understand the timing correctly, of the 9 large lots that are talked about, lot 1, 2, and 3 are going to be done in 2027, lot 4, 5, and 6 in 2028, and lot 7, 8, and 9 in 2029. So if we take a decision, this will last, this process of franchising, if the go-ahead is given, will last till at least 2029, so 4 years hence. Is that correct? So it's not just a couple of years, it's 4 years. But in answer to Councillor Alden's other questions.
I'll start and pick up some of the questions and then I'll defer to the team. So on your last point, Councillor Alden, I do agree, is that if we are going to change again the direction of travel, we should do a proper thorough around what that would mean. So allowing a scheme, as Councillor Huxwell has just set out, to bed in and see how that works as well. We've been given no direction to consider municipalisation, but as the consultation's gone throughout, a number of local councillors have expressed that as their preferred choice as well. But obviously at the moment that is not available to us. It won't be available to us until the new legislation. We're not going to discount it. We will do thorough work if we, if we're directed to sort of transition on that basis as well, but it would be some years off. I think also on the consultation, Rachel will correct me if I get this wrong. I think this is a much higher response rate than we've ever seen on any public consultation that ourselves and the local authorities have undertaken as well. So whilst I get your point that this is a few people out of 2.4 million in this region, it has attracted a much higher response rate than other consultations we've carried out as a collective of public authorities as well. On the financial risks for Dudley, I think the concerns for each of the local authorities as constituent members of the combined authority is about whether or not if there was financial pressure that it would come back on local authorities to manage that as well. We've had council advice on that as well, and it would be for the combined authority to manage that. That was as recent as last week as well. So we've managed to resolve those questions from Dudley on that basis. And of course, franchising will give us the toolkit to allow us to buy a network based on available funding. So it's actually a risk mitigation for any increased costs as well, if you want to look at it on that basis. I get your point about bus depot costs as well. We've already been in the business. I think we've acquired a couple of depots already, so we've got some real information that we are using around managing those costs as well. And we'll be looking to use capital through future CRSTS grant as well to sort of minimise borrowing. And that means that every penny of revenue that comes as a part of the franchise network will be reinvested in the network and buy as much bus routes as the funding that we do have available. Of course, we need to see the outcome of the CSR to answer those other questions about whether we'll have more under a franchise system or less. I think the point is that we'll be able to, every penny will buy more network under a franchise system than under the current market as well. But I think we have to wait until we know what funding is available before we can answer that question fully. Of course, particularly working with Councillor Courts as the leader of Solihull Council, been working, looking and very closely about what it is that we're doing to market the network, not just in terms of usual catch the bus week and that sort of stuff. It's also about how do we make sure that buses meet the requirements of people who want to use them or attract more people to them. So making sure buses are reliable. That comes back to how we invest in the highway network to make sure that buses are freed up from congestion, etc. as well. There's a whole package of measures that would make the bus more attractive and also looking at growth of the network through increasing revenue locally, not just looking for government support around how things are costed as well. I don't know whether there's any other points that needed to be picked up, but I'll defer to the team.
I've just had one point that you asked directly, Councillor Holden, which is around the total bus journeys, more or less bus journeys associated with the assessment. Of course, picking up on Anne's point, the assessment was modelled without the additional funding that the region has currently been putting into bus services. And what that showed was in each instance, we got more bus service for money and for miles than we do in any other scenario. So therefore, franchising showed the best outcome. That still showed a declining model in journeys because that was modelled without the additional funding we collectively and regionally have been putting in, albeit with government support and assuming. And that was so that the case showed like for like. And obviously that's been one of the key risks that's been set out in conversations with local authorities, i.e. will this risk fall back to us? One of the key conversations has been, well, the risk kind of already sits with us collectively because that's how we've been managing it and why we've been managing it. But in the event that in the future that additional funding that's protected the network could not be found, then it's still the most beneficial outcome, albeit through the wider levers that Anne's talking about. I think we are all hopeful that there will be continued conversations on what levels of funding can be invested into the network.
Thank you. Yeah, so just so I understand right, so in terms of the legal risk to councils, we're saying the only risk is an increase in the transport levy. There's no other call that can be made on council finances.
I don't know whether we've got somebody from, but we had that council advice, didn't we?
Yeah, it's all contained within the opinion. No, that wouldn't be included in the pack anyway, but
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, obviously, I want to say thank you to officers because they've gone through assessment, they've gone through audit and consultation. And I still, right from beginning, when officers presented the case for franchising, I wasn't that happy. I expressed my opinion at that time that officers are not very clear, not passionate about the franchising system. As Manchester's, they had 2 consultations. They have the very rough ride from operators, but eventually they got there, and now we can see the benefits. In a short time, their patronage went up to 8%, and they kept £2 fare. When it comes to risks, financial risk, the system is broken, it's not reliable, it's not affordable. The taxpayer already pays it, and the passengers pay for it. And if you are carrying on like this, I think this, the system itself will become to stand still, and the operators realize, and they have cooperated with us. And far as I'm concerned, far as people I represent out there, the perception is not a perception perception. I believe it. It was a cash cow gifted by corrupt politicians to their private funders. Far as I'm concerned, and they have come to, and I'm so glad that it's not a public ownership, it's a public control of our network for the benefit of our passenger, our communities, and for our business and for our economy. People raise about financial risk, about that, what do you call it? Depots? How do you pronounce it? Depots? Yeah, depots. Now, I give you an example. We had a newly built depot in Coventry, and that was gifted something like £1. Now they got a lease. They got a lease for 70, 80 years. They want millions of pounds. That is selling family silver, and that is sold by politicians. We sold our family silver, and nobody cared that we are gifting these assets to these private operators, and we are in a chaos. You talk about subsidy. We have basic money from the government. We have BSOD money from government. We have trust money, CR, STS. These are public fundings. And then we spend money on infrastructure for private companies to make money. Today is a great day that we have the consultation. Yes, there are not many people reply, but look at the time when we get elected. How many people vote for us? Now, my question to officers is, do we have control when we negotiate with operators on fares, on frequency, on reliability, or on the timetable? No, we don't. You don't have a control. The politician don't have a control. So this is a right way to move forward. Yes, municipalization in Reading and other places is the best system. We have bus awards, and it's the private, it is the public company, I think, won 5 times out of 7. So please, all I'm saying is that we have opportunity here now to make sure that our system is affordable, reliable, and goes where the people want these buses to go. Now, my question to officers is this. You have, as you said, individual meetings with leaders, 7 leaders, and you have open consultation with the councillors in those cities. I know you have came and you worked very hard as far as Coventry was concerned, but we see 3 councils. One of them is opposing it and the other 2 is somewhat supporting it. Is it because you failed to persuade them, or is it because of political dogma that they are not supporting this system?
I don't actually think officers can actually answer the thoughts of the relevant councils and their opinion, but of course the leaders of those councils will be able to have their say on Friday at the board meeting under this item agenda as to the reasons for their view on bus franchising. But I think it would be very unfair to ask officers to speak on behalf of politicians from those constituent local authorities.
All I'm asking officers, where do you think, in their opinion, I'm sure they can give opinion that, where the issues are. They don't have to answer exactly my question, but where they think, where there is a doubt with those.
Chairman, it's just totally inappropriate to ask officers to give political opinions.
I must agree with Councillor Alden. I do not think it is the role of officers to give political opinions. Could you give an opinion to Councillor Akhtar without straying into the political realm, please, officers?
Just a couple of key points. I think you mentioned there, Councillor Rector, three councils. I think one council has opposed and one is neutral. What I would say is within those dialogues and discussions, there have been some key points. It was mentioned earlier during the slide that it was the interpretation of levels of risk, but there have been ongoing dialogue with those local authorities around what those risks are and how they can be mitigated. And we will learn to what level that has influenced views when it comes to the board on Friday. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Great. I've got a couple of questions. In terms of the steer report on page 55, powers 2.6, 2.7, working with members, I would like to note disappointment given all the engagement we've had from the member relationship team here and the presentations we've had by officers at TDOSC itself, that it doesn't appear to be mentioned, or the level of commitment from officers and the responses from members of TDOSC in 2.6 and 2.7 of the steer report. As I think Steve has mentioned, we've had all councillor sessions at TDOSC members. We've had all councillor sessions for the all 470 councillors across the West Midlands. Online, I've participated, as have many members here participated in one or both of those, and we discussed this at this TDOSC committee multiple times, and members have had a fair opportunity to make their comments known. So I'm not sure why that wasn't picked up in the steering report and on page 55, 2.6 and 2.7. And if officers could come back to me on that one. And just looking through the responses, the one that I don't understand is page 72 at the top, Bus Users UK. And it says they oppose the introduction of the proposed franchising scheme. Now, this is a charitable trust, as I understand it. It does seem rather interesting, their response. And I don't know if anyone would like to comment further on that view and any further detail in the response which they oppose the introduction of the franchising scheme from Bus Users UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, on your comments around steer, then I'm sure we can reflect those and helpful points and comments, because in actual fact there has been considerable dialogue and engagement through the process, and some dedicated sessions around that. With regards to Bus Users UK, yes, you're correct. They are a charitable trust. They're funded publicly, and we have engaged with them. We feel that their views around this have also cemented around risk assessments, but of course they have not necessarily been the same party to dialogues in the way that say local authority colleagues have. We continue to work with them around their views, and we recognise their views, but as it sets out in our response to the report, we also feel that in terms of the enhanced partnership, we have probably reached quite a maximum level of where we can, with actually some of the considerable outputs that we've achieved to date through enhanced partnership with the support of Bus Users UK. And we also note that a lot of their commentary is also based on experience around reviewing other places, including Greater Manchester, which doesn't always align with our own dialogue that we are receiving from those other authorities and partners that we review. But we continue to engage with them also through the process.
Thank you. Any other comments before I move on to the next item agenda from members?
Just the recommendations, if I may, Chair.
Yeah.
I've gone through the document again in terms of governance. There's little or no reference, so point it out to me, because if it is in there, it is very short, and quite clearly work is necessary, and I think it's important that that's reflected in our considerations and deliberations, certainly on recommendation 5, in that we note the necessary work of governance to be concluded, to be started. So it's I'm not going to give words to Dan, but I think you'll understand the point I'm making. Governance of franchising will be extremely important. And if I can just take the opportunity of speaking to Councillor Alden through the committee, my question in terms of the governance aspect or municipalisation was to ensure that we have the opportunity to clarify what it actually means. So we probably are on the same page. It's understanding what municipalisation actually means going forward, and it doesn't preclude, if we decide to go down the path of franchising, the opportunity to discuss and hopefully agree, should it suit the West Midlands. I don't think you'll object to that.
Picking up on the governance viewpoint, I hear what you say, John. When I reflect the views of this committee to the board on Friday, could we make that a clear view of the committee, if that is acceptable to the committee, that we would like a lot more information about governance and how this committee in particular is part of that whole governance process?
That's the practicalities of governance and the governance process itself.
Yes, I don't want to try and agree some sort of wording.
No, I understand
now, but the general principle that we would like to be fully involved in that whole governance process as the relevant statutory scrutiny committee. Yes.
Agreed.
Good. Did you want to say something, Pete?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it was just to note the points raised around governance. I think, just going back to Councillor Miliklis's question as well, we only have an element of the governance on there. The document I was referring to was actually sent out as a local authority questions and answers question with an appendix specifically on governance. And I'm not sure it's gone out with these papers. It's a 5-page document.
Could we circulate it for members of the committee?
We will circulate that immediately following.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we've got agreement, I think. So I'm going to move on to the recommendations of 1 through to 6. Is that all agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so we move to item 7 there, and the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Review. Can I make clear to members there is a confidential appendix, which is item 13, I believe. If you would like to raise any points under item 13, please flag that up, because we would have to go into private session, as I understand the governance procedure now. So if we can keep it in public papers, great. But I don't want to stifle debate. So if you do want to raise any item on the private appendix, please do flag that up in advance, and I will ask to go into private session. Yes, Councillor Kay.
I don't believe I've got Appendix 13. I must protest that the vast number of PDFs I've got relating to this meeting. It may be that members who are working with printed packs have a pack in a logical order, but those of us working with the electronic version of the pack, there are very few agenda items in the main public pack, and all the rest is scattered amongst a myriad of PDFs where, to be honest, I don't know whether I've seen all of them or whether I've been able to read them in a logical order. And I hope in a future meeting, those of us who receive electronic copies of the pack can actually do so. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Again, my understanding is they have to be late reports because send out, we couldn't provide the information before send out to board, and this is one of the consequences of having this meeting before the board meeting. While it's very helpful that we get to see all the papers for the board meeting, it means that if reports aren't ready yet for the board meeting, we don't get to see them in advance, and that's why there were a number of late reports. But I take the point that you made. I'm informed item agenda 13 and the appendix was actually sent out electronically in advance of the meeting. I think.
Yeah, On
Yes.
Thursday,
Yeah.
Jana sent it out.
Yeah. So it did get sent out, but I accept it was a late report. Right, having gone through that process, Sandy, item 7.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper that is going to see a board on the 9th of May relates to the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement and the review that has been undertaken over the past few months alongside local authority colleagues and internal team promoters. Now, the purpose of the report is really around to provide an update on where we are with progress against the overall programme, but also to consider where we have areas of delivery confidence or not in some cases for the final 2 years of the programme. So the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement came into being in 2022 and it runs up to March 2027 as the first of our multi-year funding settlements for transport. Now, in terms of what we're trying to achieve, it's very much focused on the outcomes that are aligned to our local transport plan core strategy. So sustaining economic success, creating a fairer society, supporting local communities and places, becoming more active and tackling the climate emergency. Now, as part of the overall programme, we have developed a number of projects, about 75 in total, which were supported by an initial investment from government of just over £1 billion. Since further work on that and rebaselining undertaken in 2023 and 2024, there have been further additions to that programme through additional grants, largely through the Trailblazer Devolution Deal and the Network North funding. So whilst there has been additional funding, we are working to an overall programme of just over £1.39 billion. Now, whilst there has been a lot of funding that has come via central government, there is also the element around local contributions, again, a core part of the funding requirements from central government. Now, what we've been focusing on as part of the review is the type of work that's been undertaken, and we can demonstrate that there has been very strong delivery performance in the first 3 years of the programme. But whilst there has been some really good progress, we are still significantly behind the spend forecasts that were originally established when the programme was first set out. Now, the downside of that sort of being behind the programme is that there is a risk that central government could claw back the funding that is not fully utilised during that initial CRSTS period. And indeed, it could have a significant bearing on what funding allocations could come forward as part of CRSTS2. So obviously showing strong delivery confidence back to government has been an absolutely crucial part of the programme. Section 2.15 of the report sets out where we are with the overall levels of spend that have been approved in the programme and the overall levels of spend that are actually physically spent and out of the door. So whilst I've touched on the strong performance and some of the risks, one of the areas of consideration has been how do we make sure that we utilise all of the funding within the initial 5-year period to provide that delivery confidence back to government. So what we've been assessing with our local authority partners and our internal scheme promoters is an option of providing a mitigation strategy, and that would to look at where we can utilise that funding in the best way going forwards into the last final 2 years. So in order to drive those discussions, what we've focused on are a series of principles, and those are set out in section 3.3. The first one being that no CRSTS1 funding is to be handed back. The second one is any reallocation must be in accordance with the local transport plan and mayoral priorities. Anything that is introduced into the programme must have a very high delivery confidence rating, and any rephasing of CRSTS1 funding would be the first priority for delivery in CRSTS2, obviously subject to achieving the necessary single assurance framework gateway approvals. So what the review has led to is one, where we feel that we have a lower level of delivery confidence, and those are the schemes where local authority partners and our internal scheme promoters have given us what they feel are realistic delivery timelines. And there's a number of reasons why these projects have moved in terms of overall delivery timelines. It isn't just around one specific issue. There's a combination of issues ranging from resource availability, capacity and capability, ongoing engagement around some of those projects, but also where we've had to redesign projects based on sort of more detailed work. So there's a whole number of reasons why projects have been slipping in that initial period. And I will draw out that that is not unique to the West Midlands. This is pretty much happening in every mayoral combined authority and their CRSTS1 programmes up and down the country. So as part of the work that we've done on reviewing where we are and those conversations with local authorities over the past 2 months or so, there has been an identification of circa £162 million to rephase. That does not mean that the projects that are within the programme are stopped or paused. The development of those continues as normal. It's just the delivery is going to happen within the CRSTS2 period. What we've set out in section 3.8 of the report are the schemes that would come into the programme to utilise that funding to make sure we stay true to that first principle of no funding to be handed back to government on our initial programme. One of the other areas that we've undertaken some work on whilst the review has been ongoing is to make sure that we have a degree of independent assurance applied. What schemes are being rephased, so what is being pushed further out? Are those the right schemes, and does a professional independent review agree with those schemes that are being rephased? But also then to consider the schemes that are being brought into the programme and make sure there is a degree of assurance undertaken that they do meet those conditions around having high delivery confidence and can meet the various objectives of our local transport plan and local transport priorities. So what we've set out in the paper are those schemes that will be brought in. The private appendix, that is Appendix 13, sets out the detail behind the schemes that are being rephased into CRSTS2. Chair, I will pause there for any questions.
Thanks, Sanjay, for the report. I've always taken the view that one authority should benefit once every 7 years. So ultimately, everybody gets their fair share of whatever funding is available. I'll make reference but not mention agenda item 13 spells out where these schemes are. And I have to say, as a Coventry representative, that I am concerned. But I need to understand why Coventry is not part of the CRSTS going forward. There needs to be an understanding. You may have given the answer in terms of local authorities are expected to part fund proposals going forward. Are you going to confirm that in the case of Coventry, they are not doing so? Are you indicating that Coventry, are not participating in CRSTS as we would expect as EDOSC committee? There's a number of issues that arise from the absence that it shows, and we need to understand why.
I will thank you, Councillor, and I think maybe it's something in the presentation, but the reason why Coventry is not listed in Appendix 13 is that they are delivering to their programme. So the schemes that are listed in Appendix 13 are the ones that have demonstrated a low delivery confidence and the ones that will be rephased into CRSTS2. Coventry, and we've done extensive work with Coventry officers, there is no changes to their programmes, and we have a high level of delivery confidence around what is being delivered by Coventry as part of CRSTS1. So what is in Appendix 13 is not the entire programme, it is just the schemes that are being rephased due to a lower level of delivery confidence.
If I may come back then, that's reassuring. Nevertheless, I think Coventry representatives need the reassurance that Coventry benefits from CRSTS 1, 2, 3, however many levels, that basically we get our fair share.
Absolutely, councillor. And the allocations that were established when CRSTS was developed back in 2022 remain unchanged for any local authority. The programme remains the same. What this is talking about is shifting some of those delivery timelines based on lower delivery confidence and making sure we're not putting any funding locally at risk by not spending it, and introducing some new schemes into the mix to utilise that funding. But as I say, the conversations, and we have had a large number of workshops alongside Phil Havenhand, who's been leading on some of that work with them, and Coventry has had a very high level of delivery confidence, hence no schemes were being rephased into CRSTS2.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got Councillor Clements, I believe, wanting to speak, and then I'll call you, Councillor Akhtar. Just like to point out, there is one geographic scheme in item 13 in Coventry under
I didn't see it.
Under the WMCA Park and Ride Estate Development.
Still don't see it. I'll have to get my glasses.
Okay. Right, Councillor Clements.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Huxtable, and thanks, Sandeep, for the presentation. And I have to say, I'm finding the presentation and the report slightly opaque. But what I've understood is that because of the low level of spend or low level of delivery on certain projects, you're looking at bringing some forward and deprioritising others. Is that generally what we're to understand from this?
So when we're talking, maybe deprioritisation is probably a stronger word than what we've done with the officers. It's more about rephasing those projects. What has been brought forward is they're not brand new projects. They're either projects that we're already doing and are scalable, so we can up the spend against some of the things like local network improvement plans and highways maintenance. But other projects that were earmarked for CRSTS2 that do have a high level of confidence are being brought forward. So things like the Birmingham East Side Metro extension section 4, for example, to come in whilst we've got the opportunity to rephase some of that funding. So the projects as they stand, no, like I've mentioned, and it's clear in the report, no projects are being stopped or paused. All the projects remain. It is around the delivery of projects into CRSTS2, which releases some funding to utilise now where we have the opportunity to do so.
Okay, thanks for
clarifying. Answer your question, Councillor Clements.
Yeah, it's just, can I just have a supplementary if
You're on mute, Councillor Clements.
You're on mute, please.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
Lost sound.
Hello?
No, we've lost sound. Can I move on and come back to you?
Okay.
Oh no, we can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, I was just saying thanks to, through you, sir, thanks to Sandeep for clarifying that. And obviously it's good to hear, as a Birmingham councillor, the chances of pushing forward more quickly with the East Side Section 4. But I suppose given that as Councillor Nicholas has pointed out, that in Coventry there isn't this concern because their level of pace and level of delivery is higher. Is there any conversation that you're having with officers across all councils to look at what they could learn from Coventry? And what apart from the sort of construction inflation, capacity issues, staffing, I mean, are there any other issues like the business planning process, the single assurance framework, and things like that we've discussed in the past in this committee? I mean, what is really the root cause of most of these delays?
Thanks, Councillor. So there isn't a single theme that sort of fits in terms of what is responsible for the delays. It's a combination of areas. And as you've rightly pointed out, we have reviewed the single assurance framework, and that stands as being a very robust process for any public spend and making sure we're making the right investment decisions. We have tried to make the top and tail of that a bit more efficient in terms of making sure we're trying to bring those timelines down. So that has changed. There's been changes to the way we do legal agreements to make sure that we can enter into legal agreements quite quickly. So there are a number of changes that have happened from a process perspective. The other part of the equation then comes down to things like capacity and capability, procurement timelines around some of that. One of the things that we have been discussing with all local authorities is how do we actually think about future delivery models? That's something that won't kick in for the time that we have for CRSTS1. But as we sort of move into further funding rounds, is thinking about how we actually work with our supply chain and our industry partners on more of a strategic partnership basis. And that's something that could help with capacity and capability in the future. There isn't a magic wand that we can wave straight away. We are doing a number of sessions with all scheme promoters around lessons learned, best practice where we see it, and how can that be applied across the piece to make sure that we do have an overall high level of delivery confidence against the entire programme. What I will also point out is this was our first multi-year funding settlement on CRSTS, and a lot of the projects within the programme were relatively immature at the point of entry. So it has taken longer to mature those projects into something which is movable into the delivery space. And one thing that we have learned very evidently is whilst 5-year funding periods are good, project delivery on the ground doesn't neatly fit into 5-year blocks. So that's one of the areas where we have had to see some of that movement against the programme.
Any no, right. Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Akhtar, then Councillor Alden.
Sunday, I will appeal to you for your generosity. So since Coventry is delivering within time and within a budget, is it possible rather than government clawing back that money, normally the government give one hand and take it back with both hands, is it possible you can reward Coventry where from other...
Good try.
I had to. You get my views.
Well, Coventry have. So Coventry will have an uplift in highways maintenance funding, where they've also got a very strong delivery record, as well as on their local network improvement plans. So there are uplifts that are being applied for local authorities to utilise in the right way.
Just quickly, see other authorities which are struggling to spend the money. Sunday, when a next funding comes along, will they be awarded again, or will you ask them, be giving you the already money, spent that before you can put your bid in for further?
It's not quite as clear cut as that, councillor, and how this tends to work. And I mentioned the point around the maturity of the project pipeline. Some projects do have higher levels of complexity and they're taking longer to develop and deliver. So what we'll be looking at is the key focus during this period where the projects get delivered or not is the ongoing development to make sure we have a project pipeline that is closer to delivery than what we have. As we move into CRSTS2, we've effectively used this first 5-year period as a mobilisation period to enable, one, the right capacity and capability to come into place, a better understanding of the processes and letting those bed down, but also being clearer on what sort of delivery challenges come forward in those earlier stages of development that can be addressed as lessons learned into CRSTS2. So, I don't need to say this, but, we're absolutely clear that this isn't around delivering transport projects for transport's sake. This is about turning the dial on some of those big outcomes that we need to see changing across the West Midlands based on those overarching objectives that we're trying to meet.
And dare I say, link into place-based strategy that are being undertaken by all 7 constituent authorities. Councillor Alden.
Thank you. So one of a long-running problems that's happened on this committee many times I've been on it, is just around delays in delivery, and obviously that has significant impacts. Things that are being shunted now into CRUS2 could end up costing more than originally. That could have other issues around budgets, meaning things have to be dropped. It does feel like perhaps in the new municipal year, this is something this committee ought to do a deep dive on, about just trying to get to the bottom of why is it consistently projects end up being late in this region. Because we run the risk that, as Councillor Akhtar mentioned, government could end up just taking away a lot of this money, and that would be a disaster for our region. And so we really do need to actually get to a point where, one, we can stop things being constantly delayed, and two, we have a mature enough pipeline of projects that actually they're ready on the shelf to go. So that when there is money that needs to be spent quickly, we're able to spend it on things that are wanted and not end up spending on things which aren't necessarily a priority but can be done quickly.
No, I absolutely agree. In terms of maturing the pipeline is one of the key reasons. I think we see the delays. Once we've got to a certain point in that project development, we should have a far higher degree of confidence around the delivery and the delivery challenges that we're bound to, are likely to be borne out. I'm sure Councillor Huxtable as chair will have a view around the deep dives, and obviously that's a discussion that's been held here before, and we are very keen to see a greater member involvement in how that oversight and scrutiny can be provided.
I think Councillor Alden's suggestion on the deep dive is an excellent one.
Chair,
Yeah.
can I, before you go along this path, is it possible for me to add some information? With your permission.
Yeah, of course.
Right. We in effect on the active travel MEG whilst it may not have been labelled a deep dive, in effect it was, because we explored the reason why there were delays in some of the active travel, particularly the cycling projects. And there were two key reasons, one which I know has been addressed and one which needs to be flagged up to everyone's attention. The first one was the length of time that it took from saying, yes, you can have the money, to actually delivering the money. And it was the legal process, which was long and complicated and has since been simplified and will not delay projects again. But the second thing was UK Cycling, who moved the goalpost in what they considered to be best practice. And we need to deliver best practice to be a reliable deliverer of projects, if you like. We're level 5, which I think is the top level that you can be, because the projects that we deliver are gold standard projects. So when they move the goalpost, Phil Havenhand had no option but to resubmit some of the plans which had previously been agreed, and that delayed a number of projects. So when you look at why a project has been delayed, it is complex, inevitably, and it's project specific most often. Thank you.
Thank you for that helpful intervention and clarification, Councillor Hyatt. Taking that on board, I was going to say, I think Councillor Alden has a really good point about the need for a deep dive, and it's a shame Councillor Petrol has just left the room, because he did mention to me the procurement issues as well in terms of any of these projects, and that procurement should be a key element of any deep dive, because that can add considerable delay, and especially if we don't get it right, and the contractor we actually choose in terms of the procurement exercise then goes into liquidation, which then adds further delay and further cost in terms of procuring a new contractor to complete the scheme, as has happened with some Crust Swan projects. And I'm thinking in particular of Rail Package 1, new stations at Darlaston and Willenhall, where that happened. So I'm looking at government to actually take that deep dive forward. Yes.
Just on procurement,
yes,
a lot of these schemes are being delivered directly by the local authorities. So if you want to include procurement, you will also need to include each local authority procurement team's involvement where the local authorities are procuring directly.
I think we can get evidence as part of the deep dive from our local authority colleagues. Yes, thank you for that point. Any other? I know Councillor Gethin has asked to speak, then Councillor Kay. Councillor Gethin.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit that I do agree with Councillor Alden, and it is a concern, as it is funding in the region that could possibly be affected. And it's really disappointing to see that we are behind on a lot of these projects. As part of the overview on this committee moving forward, obviously, speaking to Chair, would it be an idea that, we have a list of the projects that are running and where you're at with those projects? Because I'm presuming you've got a lot of projects in the pipeline and there's nothing here to say what's happening with those. So you're saying that you're running on time with some of these projects, but I feel sometimes we don't see enough, and then when there's a problem, then all of a sudden we're trying to do a deep dive, we're trying to figure things out, and that's a little bit too late. And it would be good if we could have overview at the meetings just to see where we're at, if there is a problem coming, rather than we have a problem. Is that something that we can address?
Yes, so one of the things that we have been maturing over the past 12 to 18 months has been the capital reporting. So all of these projects are captured through the Transport Portfolio Office. So we are trying to provide that visibility in terms of the overall capital programme reporting across the piece. One of the areas that we are keen to see further involvement in on though is having a programme of deep dives across the CRSTS programme and the capital programme as a whole, sort of working that through with yourselves, probably some sort of task and finish group that would do those deep dives. And there is a recommendation report going to CA board that there should be a programme of deep dives set out for the next municipal year, where a number of projects can be picked at and gone through in a lot more detail. Whilst there is disappointment, I think, just coming back to the point around overall delivery, like I say, this is no different in any mayoral combined authority area. It has been effectively a mobilisation in the first 5 years of CRSTS, with lots of projects in the pipeline that need to be matured through a process. So that is absolutely recognised, and that should be a big part of the problem that should not exist in CRSTS2, because we've established a stronger pipeline of projects to come forward.
That's okay.
Sorry. To add, just to add, again, a lot of these projects are being delivered directly by the local authorities. So whilst we're working with each local authority colleagues to make sure that the reporting that comes to this committee is as up to date as accurate, and doing the things that you're asking to be flagged, Councillor Geffin, it's also you can go back and talk to the officers within each local authority as well. So you've got a more direct view of what's happening within each of your individual councils as well. It's something that I've been encouraging the STOB group, the Strategic Transport Officer group, to do, is to engage with you as members of this committee as well, so that you've got better visibility about what's happening in your own local authorities around this particular programme as well. So I just wanted to highlight that might be a station to have as well.
Thank you, Ed. Councillor Kay.
Thank you. I think hand in hand with delay goes cost, if no better reason is than inflationary pressures. In the context of financial constraints both on government and on local authorities, there's clearly a finite ceiling on how far costs can go forward, and that it might be better to complete a smaller number of projects rather than having a larger number of projects in an unfinished state, because it may be that money spent on incompleted projects could be wasted money in the long term. So as part of the deep dive, I think we ought to understand the finance buffers which we have as a safety net, to ensure that the scrutinised projects is actually going to get completed.
I think that's an important point for consideration within the deep dive.
Thank you, Chair. Sandy, I know for a fact last week you met our leader and briefed. I'm sure you are meeting other leaders and they're well aware of the situation.
Yes, Councillor. So we have met pretty much all the leaders and chief exec senior officers at all the local authorities we have. A couple more to do this week, but by and large we've seen everyone. So yes, it's the same talk through of the report and the challenges that we've seen. A focus on the principles, but predominantly one around we don't want to hand any money back. We need to show government strong delivery confidence around our programme. make sure we can bring in the right projects to utilise that funding to deliver the outcomes that we want to see across the West Midlands. So that has been the message. So we have seen Wolverhampton, Dudley, Coventry, and a few more in there. We've got Sandwell later on this afternoon and Birmingham tomorrow. So yes, a number of meetings have been held.
Just quickly, so it's mainly you're concerned about the project and programs delivered by local authorities, not the one which are delivered by Transport for West Midlands?
It's a combination. It can be any project by any scheme promoter. But where we have seen some of the bigger challenges has been within the local authority.
Okay, I'm going to move on, if that's all okay, to item 8 and the regional average speed enforcement report. And Darren.
Good afternoon, everybody. You will have seen on agenda item 8 the report, hopefully, that was sent through, although I will give you a brief overview of that already. This is around providing a review on the ongoing progress towards establishing a new regional speed enforcement working agreement between West Midlands Police, Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, the 7 constituent local authorities and the combined authority as well, providing recommendations along the way. The purpose is to provide an update on that progress, and I shall hopefully get around to some good news in a short while. And give you a sort of status idea of where we are and how this fits into the Regional Road Safety Action Plan that was launched last year. To give you a bit of a background, we are working on the basis of, in 2015 to 17, there was an annual average of 1,048 people killed and seriously injured on our roads in the region. That was a societal cost of about £320 million each year. In 22 to 24, that figure has increased to 1,138. And in 2023, which is the latest TFT figures, that societal cost increased from 320 million to 444 million, just for our region. That is not a national figure. Excessive and inappropriate vehicle speed is the main contributing factor in incidents resulting in a fatality or serious injury. And young people, particularly males 18 to 25, are disproportionately represented in those collision and casualty figures. The need for a new multi-year operational agreement for speed enforcement was identified as action number 1 in the Road Safety Action Plan. Not that we're going down number by number through the list, but it was probably the big ticket item in the action plan, noticing the severity of the collisions and the injuries. And the aim really is to reduce road harm and the impacts of excessive speeding, and recognising that a new approach was required. New approach was required for a number of reasons. 1, because the old agreement was expiring. But 2, because we've got a new action plan and strategy for road safety in the region, and also because we can see that the figures for killed and serious injury casualties and the societal economic cost of that was or is increasing. Just for clarity for everybody, the joint working agreement is actually a West Midlands Police document. It's the West Midlands Police, OPCC, 7 constituent local authorities and WMCA, who are the signature parties within that have agreed to it. It's the responsibility of the local highway authorities to set speed limits in their area, but it's West Midlands Police who have the powers to enforce those posted speed limits. And there's now significant efforts to increase the level of enforcement going forward. A good bit of news, I suppose, is that activations processed to disposal. Give you clarity again here. Disposals are fixed penalty fines, options to attend a national driver offenders retraining course, or prosecution. Those are now, the activation to disposals are the highest that we've seen since this scheme started in 2015. And there's a ratio that we look at. So in 2021-23, there was about 13% of all activations on these speed cameras that went to a disposal, so to a fine or an endorse course or a prosecution. We've now got up to 54%. So that rate is significantly increased already with the work that's been going on with the partnership. The new approach is not about punishing car drivers, it's about protecting all road users. And particularly those who are most vulnerable for road traffic collisions, such as pedestrians and young vehicle occupants. The average speed enforcement scheme is the most robustly evaluated road safety initiative in our region. And the most recent study, independent study that was commissioned to assess the effectiveness of the scheme, was able to assess 27 locations of the 51. The reason it was only 27 is because the others were quite new, so we didn't have robust data for those. But of those 27, since implementation, we can clearly see that personal injury collisions have reduced by 35.2%. And that's in comparison to a 0% reduction at control locations for that study, where there's been no historical speed enforcement activity at all. So it demonstrates the effectiveness of this scheme. A new business case is currently being finalised, and that in itself is showing some really good positive draft results, one of which is on the socioeconomic benefit, which is an annual benefit of around £15 million per year. It would be if it's annual, £15 million. And obviously we have that 35.2% reduction from the ASE schemes earlier too. The difficulty with that is that £15 million socioeconomic benefit isn't hard cash, and the hard cash is what pays for the scheme. And the scheme has an annual deficit of around £1.8 million, which has to be covered by Westminster Police and the local authority. However, the assessment of the benefit cost ratio for the scheme is very high. We're talking between 2.8 up to 5.1 across either a 15-year assessment period or on an annual period for 25 to 26. And that makes this scheme a high value for money investment. The objectives obviously are to, they're listed in the paper, but one to particularly focus on is that our target is to reduce killed and seriously injured casualties by 50% by 2030. And as I said from the figures at the start of this report, those figures for killed and serious injured casualties are on the increase. So we really need to consider what it is that we're doing with our most robustly and effective interventions. The new joint working agreement has now, I'm very pleased to say, been signed by all 10 parties officially. We have the signature on it, and that is Appendix 1 to this paper, where you can see a copy of that document. That's a 2-year document, a 2-year agreement with a review period every year in October, and that then will obviously be looking. We're looking for further years beyond that, provided we get the model right for this. And I'm pleased to say, because I was listening to the questions earlier on, delivered on time within the action plan. So that's good, thank you. The joint working agreement includes joint key objectives, status of the agreement, the review periods, roles and responsibilities of all parties, 5 schedules as well, covering governance, maintenance, levels of enforcement, etc. Whilst there is a significant deficit here, Westminster Police have agreed they have the highest level of cost, which is about 2.4, 2.5 million. Operational costs. They've agreed to consume all of their operational costs, and in addition to that have agreed to contribute £300,000 each year for the next 2 years to the local authorities to help cover their costs for maintenance and operational costs as well. That £300,000 will be split based on the KSIs, the killed and serious injured casualties, in each area. The next steps then are to finalise the business case and then take that document to the financial directors of all the parties to ensure that everybody's fully aware of the financial situation as well as the road safety and socio-economic benefits. And then review that and put in place the timescales for reviewing the joint working agreement going forward with the road safety partnership. I think that rather than go through the rest of it, I think that's a relative summary of where we are with this paper, and hopefully, as I say, most of you have been able to at least see it, if not read it as well. And I'm open to taking questions.
Thank you very much. Much good. Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Chair. Although it is a recommendation from the Passenger and Road Safety Meg, I have reservations about requesting that we should receive the proceeds from road funds from government as compared with receiving a ransom grant from government. There's two reasons. First of all, the general public may, with some justification, start wondering whether the sighting of speed cameras is for the purposes of raising revenue rather than for road safety. And the second reason is that as drivers become educated as to where the cameras are, then revenues will fall, which means that in future years there'll be less money available for road safety projects than there would be were we to receive a ransom grant from government. Thank you.
I don't know if that's more of a comment or a question. Do you want to say anything, Darren? You don't have to.
Very briefly, the government have been written to 5 times so far, and I understand that the Police and Crime Commissioner wrote again last week. And there are obviously some pros in receiving and retaining the fine money. But obviously we don't want, this isn't about punishing people, as I said, this isn't about punishing drivers, and we don't want the public to think that it is a money-making scheme, because you can see from the figures already that this is making a 1.8 million loss every single year. It is not about making money. The retention of the speeding fines is really to try to help break even on a scheme like this, which is our most successful road safety intervention so far.
If everyone stuck to the speed limit, there would be no fines, full stop.
And everything will be safer.
Councillor Clements.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to say there's a danger of consensus breaking out, because I absolutely agree with you. If everyone obeys the rules of the roads, then there won't be any activations of these cameras, and therefore people won't have to pay fines. I mean, I wanted to congratulate Darren and everyone who's worked on this to getting to this major milestone of the agreement, because I know how much hard work it's been, and you've sweated blood over it, and it's really, really important, because in Birmingham, we have declared a road safety emergency, and we have an emergency because we have got preventable deaths and serious injuries happening almost every day, destroying the lives of families, all over our city, which we need to take action on, and this is the most powerful tool that we've got. And Councillor Kay Leslie's reflected some of the discussion that we've had in the road safety Meg, and for me, that one of the barriers to getting this in agreement in place has been getting the councils to understand the finances of this scheme, and the fact that actually it was running in deficit, and it's obviously represents a revenue pressure for local authorities essentially. So I think it's really important that we've got that clarity now, and for me that's the most powerful reason why we need the fines retentions in the region, because we need this to be a financially sustainable scheme for the long term. And certainly in Birmingham, as local councillors, one of the most frequent requests that we get from our constituencies is for more cameras, and more action on speeding, and action against the really toxic culture of dangerous driving, particularly amongst some, I'm afraid to say, certain younger men who are using our roads as racetracks. And we've got other tools on that, like the injunction against road racing. But this average speed enforcement really is the way to prevent those awful tragedies on our roads, prevent death and life-changing speeding injury. So congratulations on reaching this milestone, but I think this is just the beginning of the work. Thanks very much.
I think that also comes under comment rather than questions. I'm going to move to Councillor Nicholas.
Mine will be a comment, I'm afraid, Chair. We need to remind ourselves that these the cameras are safety cameras and are located in areas that are of concern at a local level. They are not there to raise revenue. So I don't wish to speak against the road safety meg. Nevertheless, it always has to be taken into consideration the purpose of the safety camera. I prefer to call them safety cameras than speed cameras, because that's the purpose, first and foremost, to reduce death on our roads based on local knowledge. So the work done, and I agree entirely with Liz's comment in terms of well done for the work done and the cooperation that has been shown over the years between the police and local authorities, because it is extremely important. So as to revenue being raised by these cameras, that isn't the purpose. So I'm minded to agree with Councillor Kay. I don't agree with his initial point. However, I think we should be going down the path, and this is where I'll probably speak against the Meg, in that we need to be guaranteed the funding to ensure that those good works can continue. And if these safety cameras are successful, there will be a diminishing revenue return. So I'd rather have the grant, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. You said that was a comment.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, then I'm going to move on to Councillor Orban.
The risk of also making a comment. So I'm perfectly happy to report, but I think just when we send a message back to police, we also need to really emphasise it's not just about the speed of drivers, it's about the level of uninsured and unlicensed drivers in our region, which is a significant problem. We have 8 of the 15 highest hotspots in the country in the West Midlands Met, and sadly we have 5 of the top 15 in Birmingham alone. So that is a real big issue, and until that gets dealt with, we're not going to make roads safe for the people of our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Councillor Kettle.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Dan, earlier in your briefing, you mentioned that we get something like 1,040 deaths in the year.
That was our the baseline for us. The annual figure was 1,048 in 2015 to 17, and that's what we're measuring, the 50% reduction.
Yeah, fine. But the interesting thing is that you're talking about the costs of these deaths of 400 million.
Yeah. So the cost is based on, it's a figure that Department for Transport every year publish, and that cost is based on loss of outputs, emergency service costs, NHS costs, insurance costs, and things like that. And it's a calculation that they make every year.
And that wouldn't include injuries, road injuries. That would only include.
It's a cost per injury, and they separate between fatal, serious, slight, and collision only.
So that's the overall cost we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Of injury.
You calculate those against how many casualties you've got. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kettle. Councillor Akhtar.
Darren, thank you for this strategy. In Coventry, a terrible tragedy happened on Longfellow Road in Coventry when 2 very little children died. And Coventry decided at that time that we will saturate all the main arteries, and we have. And all, as you know, all main arteries, we have average speed cameras. And Chairman, there's a sea change. And the behavior has changed of drivers. And I think my colleague John here will confirm that. Now, sir, it's fine to have a strategy, but it's our taxpayers who paid this money. The combined authority contribution is zero. You bring this strategy, where is the funding? There is no funding with it. If all these figures and deaths we have, I think the police and the combined authority should vigorously emphasize, as far as funding is concerned, fund us and fund rest of the local authorities. It's okay to give us responsibilities and bring strategies. It's coming out of our ears, but where is the funding?
I think that's probably a matter in terms of trusts or road safety grants or the
But where is it?
spending.
Mr. Chairman, where is it? This is going on. I know I met Darren a year ago you started on this project, if not more. Two. So where is the funding? So what have you been doing with Darren and talking, asking combined authority or appropriate people to fund this? No, I can't switch this on.
Darren, would you like to just give a brief overview as to funding?
Yes, sure. Okay. So you mentioned trusts. I'll start there first. If we identify, we've just done a briefing note, which we have been working on with our delivery team with Phil Havenland and co, and identified £299 million worth of schemes that could have road safety integrated into them, mainly active travel schemes. Obviously, that's not 299 million, but it is trust funding where we can identify funding opportunities and intervention opportunities for road safety. This year alone, I've been allocated for the road safety team a budget, which is the highest budget I've had in the 4 years that I've been here. That's split between revenue and capital. Obviously, there's money that's come from across to the local authorities, and then there's also the LC whips for the local authorities as well. And we work, remember, in partnership. There are 17 organisations. I know that there was the mention a minute ago about uninsured driving. If we look at our other partners with Motor Insurance Bureau, they invest about £570,000 every year to make sure that the uninsured driving scheme, Operation Scalis, and tutelage runs in this region. We are working as a partnership, and we are trying to collaborate as much as we can to make sure that the funding that we have and that our partners have makes the best use of that and maximises the benefits of road safety.
And I know that Solihull have, for example, used their High Speed 2 road safety grant to install average speed enforcement cameras, I think in 4 villages within Solihull, if I recall correctly. So there's a variety of funding, but obviously funding is crucial. Councillor Clements.
Yes, I wanted to just reflect. I mean, I think that the recommendation from the MEG, I think that was agreed by the MEG. So I don't think it's okay to retrospectively call that into question. I know Councillor Kane, Councillor Nicholas are expressing personal opinions. I mean, I think we have to be realistic here, because I've congratulated Darren and everybody involved in getting to this stage, but I know from when I was a cabinet member in Birmingham how painful and torturous this process has been, and the financial sustainability of this scheme is still in question. So retaining the fees locally is a way of making it sustainable, because a lot of the councils involved in this process at the beginning thought that this was a surplus generating scheme as it's currently constituted, and they were completely got the wrong end of the stick there. So a process had to go on to actually to work out the actual costs of operating it. And at the moment, obviously, the police are prepared to take on a lot of the cost. But in the future, we need a sustainable funding model. And that's, for me, the reason why continuing to lobby the government for local retention of the fines is really important. And I think you need to think about the other precedents. So bus lane enforcement fines, those are retained locally. Any surplus is hypothecated and has to be invested in local transport schemes and infrastructure. And in the case of the cameras, it would be to create a revenue stream to maintain the system. And I think given the financial challenges across local authorities and combined authorities, it's an option that we should be trying to lobby for, because it would actually allow us to keep this scheme going. And ditto, the clean air zone in central Birmingham is not a money generating scheme. It's there to bring down levels of nitrogen dioxide pollution to within the legally prescribed limits. But where it does generate surplus revenue, we are legally required to reinvest that in transport infrastructure and in the transport system. So I think that's the kind of progressive thinking that we need. And obviously it's maybe a more political discussion that's outside the scope of this scrutiny committee, but I think it's important that everyone understands what options that could be open on this and using the comparison to the bus lane enforcement fines. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clemson. Again, I've accept that as a comment rather than a question. And finally, Councillor Hyatt.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I agree completely and reinforce Councillor Liz Clements' comments and add a thought of my own. I drive often using Google Maps in areas that I don't know. Google Maps tell you when the speed enforcement cameras are. It beeps, it tells me when they are. So to say that the revenue will inevitably fall when people know where the cameras are, many people already know where they are already because they're driving using Google Maps. And that is, I think, is a relevant comment because our revenue might not decline. Our revenue might produce a very stable revenue fund that is much needed because we need to measure it not against the cost of the cameras, but the cost of lives lost.
Yes. And as I said, if everyone drove to the speed limit, no one would actually get fined. So there we go. Darren, thank you very much for the report. I'm going to move swiftly on as we're running over time, as always. Michael, my dad. Strategic Operations Dashboard and Dawn. And what I would say, if you've got any questions about this, to contact Dawn or Chris Kerrigan directly after the meeting. Dawn.
Great, thank you very much. I'll be very quick. Yeah, please send questions or comments afterwards. The only thing I just wanted to raise was on Ring and Ride, we did say we would follow an explanation up with that. We've got an increase of 2.7%, and the comments on that is that despite the Christmas and winter period seasonality impact, demand for the service has grown steadily, with the last week of March being the busiest week since the start of 2020, and then obviously the service was impacted by COVID. So we're kind of back up to pre-COVID levels for Ring and Ride, which is obviously excellent news. And new customers are also continuing to register. So that was it for me. I appreciate you running out.
Okay, thank you very much. As I say, how do people contact you, Dawn, if they want to drill down into any detail?
You want to send my email address?
Yeah, I can
Yes, Joanna will share Dawn's details. Okay. Thank you very much, Dawn. Item 10, Member Engagement Group Progress Report. The reports are all there in item 10. We have to agree one recommendation, which is in paragraph 1.2, as I understand it. Are we happy with the recommendation from the Passenger Communications Meg? Agree? Good, excellent. Right.
Chair?
Yes.
I was actually ill when I should have looked at the draft of the minutes from my Meg, and I was too late for my comments to be put. And during my Meg, our secretary that usually takes the minutes wasn't there, so the minutes were of necessity written on the hoof by people that were doing other jobs as well. And there was a really vital conclusion that I would really like to share with the committee, with your permission, that actually isn't in the Meg report.
Yeah, please go ahead, Councillor Hyatt.
Thank you so much. It was from the behaviour, the intelligence unit, which for us brought everything full circle, because at our very first meeting we had the intelligence unit, and the conclusion of the presentation was that it's behaviour change which is our best option in ensuring that active travel, with all the health and climate change benefits, becomes a real option for people living in the West Midlands Combined Authority. Now that's quite profound, because it impacts on how we view place-based developments. It impacts on how much of grant funding we want to spend activating cycle lanes. And so I think that's a really profound conclusion. And the recommendation was just that recordings of the meeting and the slideshows, the slide decks, should be available for all councillors, which hopefully they have been.
Well, I'll ask officers from government to make sure that if those slides, those presentation slides haven't been circulated, that they are actually circulated. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Hyatt. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you. We don't need to get any discussion, but just to alert people of one of the challenges and risks under the rail metro is for negative. We have serious concerns about is the growing risk of Midlands Rail Hub funding. So I just think people ought to be aware of that. So just wanted them to see that that had been flagged. Thank you.
And on that very point, the briefing after this meeting at 1:30 is indeed on the Midlands Rail Hub. So I would strongly encourage all members who are able to stick around for that briefing on the Midlands Rail Hub, and links to that will be shared with colleagues online. Okay, I would formally say that we note the the work programme under item 11. Is that agreed? No, good. There is no exclusion of the public and press. We've dealt with item 13. So the date of the next meeting is on Monday. It's Monday the 9th of June at 11 o'clock. Okay, so thank you all very much for your attendance this afternoon, and I wish you a safe journey to wherever you're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Chair.
Thanks.
And will we be sent the link then?
Yes.
An email, because I haven't got it at the minute. So as long that would be great.